All right. Before we talk about React, which of course we're going to do, right? I would actually like to talk about Node. So another possible interview question for sure is, what is Node? And I think if we did have pre-work on this, it might have been a few weeks ago. So if you don't know, totally fine. But yeah, what is Node? Any ideas, Pimpa?
Node is like the app that we have to download. I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, we
It's
did.
come with the npm, the Node package,
Yeah, it
something.
has something to do with NPM, Node Package Manager, for sure.
And yeah, and I think you can share your code with
Yeah, no,
that.
NPM is what enables us to share our code. Or I guess I would say use other people's code.
Yeah.
So that's NPM. That's part of Node for sure. That's an important part. Anything to add to that, Calypso?
Um, hmm. It lets you run your files outside of JavaScript.
Outside the browser. So we can
Outside.
run JavaScript outside of the browser. And what's outside of the browser mean, though? What is it actually running on?
A server?
It's used to make servers, yeah.
Okay.
But if code's not running in the browser, what does it have to be running on? Like if you're just running like a desktop application.
On the computer?
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
running on the operating system.
Okay.
So this is like normal applications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, this VS Code is running on the operating system. It's Chrome is running on the operating system. Discord, if you downloaded it, which I didn't, but I used the web version. But if you did, it'd be running on the operating system. So this is back in the day, this was a really strange idea because JavaScript just was made to make our code interactive in the browser. So it only existed in the browser. But then I believe in 2009, it escaped. When was Node created? It escaped the browser and was adopted to the operating system. So it's a runtime environment for the JavaScript to run. That's what Node is. So how do we use Node, right? Is this Node? Question mark. Like the meme, right? Is this Node? So to run this code every other day in this course, we would have to create what file first? Daniel, what file would we have to create first to just get this running without Node?
You're talking about like HTML file?
Yeah, we would need to HTML, the browser to load that, and then to have a script tag that it goes, grabs, downloads, and runs. But now, this has nothing to do with the browser. And just by typing node and then the name of the file, we can, whoops, I need to save it. We can run this JavaScript. So this was like a crazy idea back in the day, right? But now it's a tool we can't imagine building applications without, right? So why do I bring this up? Node is how Node applications are how we're going to build React and Next.js applications, right? So I want to spend a little time on Node before we jump right into Next.js, because Next.js is just going to be a Node application that enables us to build React applications. So the other cool thing about Node is that the other major part is that we have built in this Node package manager. So we can go and use other people's code, right? So we're going to come back to that in a second, but I have a mock technical for you guys. Build me a function that's input is a number and returns a Boolean of true or false if that number is odd. And hopefully this sparks some remembering from the pre-work of old. But if not, we can work through it as well. So, Zubida, if you got this on a mock technical, how could we attack this problem?
We could first define a function, then
What's a good name for this function?
Can we name it function odd?
Yeah, I'm going to call it is odd. Yep. Any parameters for this function?
Yeah, like odd numbers are not divisible by 2.
Oh, you're skipping ahead to the answer. But first off, any parameters?
We can use x, y.
You could, but we can be a little more descriptive. What data type is this always going to be? So I'm saying right here in the spec, input is a number.
Input data type.
We're just going to say num because we know it's always going to be a number. Yeah, so we can be a little more descriptive. Okay, so depending on if the number is odd, we want to return true. And if it's even, false. How can we do that?
If num, can I do divide by 2 inside those brackets?
Divide by
Like
2?
divisible by 2.
Divisible.
Returns, like, no, divide by 2
Okay.
gives us an answer without a fraction. I don't know how to equate that.
Yeah,
Like, gives
that's a
us
good
whole
thinking though.
number.
So you're thinking if it divides by 2 evenly, then you know you have an even number, right? But then
Yeah.
the problem is, how do we test if we have a whole number or not? So there's an operator
Someone can
we
help me
learned
around.
about that can be useful here. Does anyone know it?
Modulus.
Yeah, and what does the modulus operator
It's
do?
like a percent sign. It tells you what the remainder would be.
Remainder after division. Yep. So here, instead of using the division, if we use the modulus, so if we do 4 modulus 2, what would that be? Ketrin, what would 4 modulus 2 be?
It's going to be 2.
No, it's the remainder. So 4 divided by 2 is 2, but what's the remainder?
Sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, so what will this show in my console when I run this? Mohammed, what will this show? 4 modulus 2.
0.
Correct. Yeah, 0. So using this logic, how can we test? And then if we do an odd, it's going to always be what number that shows up, Mohammed?
That will be 1.
Correct. And it turns out that any odd number will be 1. So using that information, what can we do? Vanessa, any guesses for this logic? How do we determine if it's odd?
I would say if it's not equal to 0.
Yeah. Then we know we have what type of number.
Then it's an odd number.
And we want to return what Boolean?
False.
No, our function is odd. So true if it's odd.
Oh yeah, true.
Yeah. And then here we can just say return false. Okay, Vanessa, is this defining a function or invoking?
That is defining the function.
Yeah, so how can we invoke it?
For invoking it, you can write is odd and then parentheses.
Uh-huh.
Num.
Let's test. Yeah, so not num, but let's test it with some random number.
Oh, okay.
What do you think, Sadiq? How can we test this function?
Console.log, the function is sort of, maybe give it a 15 or
Sure.
16.
So I'm going to run this with node, and we see true, and 15 is odd. So that's nice. And then we can test this a little bit more, and we see false. Any questions on modulus operator? Nothing too crazy here. This is really just an introduction to showing you NPM, right? So what if you didn't want to write all this code, right? There's an NPM package called isOdd that you can use the code that someone else wrote instead of doing it yourself. So here, let's pretend we didn't write this, right? And now the thing is, with Node, if I want to create officially a Node project, I have to use the command npm init-y. And that's going to create me one file called package.json. So this is the main way we know we have a Node project. And the most important feature of package.json is when we install other packages, it'll track it for us. So let's pretend I want to use this isOdd package. I install it by saying npmi isOdd, and watch what happens when I press enter. So all of a sudden we have this new field called dependencies, and it lists isOdd. And then we have a new folder called node modules, and it went out and actually downloaded the files needed for isOdd. So here's the actual code for isOdd. And this is really the meat of what they wrote. So and number modulus 2, triple equal to 1. That's how they determine that they have an odd number. So very similar to our logic. And this also is a Node project, and they have their own package.json, and their dependencies is someone else's code called isNumber. So everyone's kind of depending on everyone else as they write code. So now, how can we went and installed isOdd. Will this work right away if we run it? No, we get an error. isOdd is not defined. So we have to import isOdd from the isOdd package. And now when we run this, it still doesn't work. Oh, we have to tell Node where we want to use the newest type of import statements. You won't have to do this. Next.js does this for you, but so you really don't have to worry about this too much. But I'm going to put type module. CommonJS is the old one. And then if I try to run this again, now I'm using someone else's code to do what I just did here. So for the whole rest of the course, we're going to depend on a lot of other people's code. And it's really cool. You can write your own. This is like very unrestricted. You can write, anyone can just upload a NPM package. So you, like, if for a fun bonus, you could submit your own. Yeah. Questions on NPM packages?
When you install, does every single NPM have a different name? Like when you install it, you put like is odd. Does it know it's that exact file?
Oh yeah. These are all a different name. So there's like tens of thousands or maybe more. And they all have different names. Yep.
Gotcha.
That's how
So
they're
when
tracked.
You put the -I, you just put whatever that exact name is into your terminal.
Yeah. So
don't know.
for the project, a package you're going to use is my date valid or date valid. Let me search. Let's pretend it's this one, right? So for the project this week, I'm going to recommend you use this package, and you can feed it a date and it'll tell you if it's valid or not. But yeah, to install this one, you would just do npm I date is valid. And they even show you the directions here. Here, the example they give is the older way to import, but you can translate this to just be import date is invalid from this package. Yeah. And then they'll give you examples of how to use it and everything.
Yeah. So then when you're importing, you need to use the function's actual name. So it's import function name from that NPM package.
This may change depending on the package. So this time,
pull it from that package, right? Whatever the function name they use.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if it's a node package, we use this weird syntax where we just give the name. This is kind of unsimilar from where we usually do like // right?
Yeah.
So this is just if it's a node package, we're grabbing it from. All right, so now I want to shift the conversation to definitely a potential interview question, right? What is React? What is React? Sadiq, what is React?
React is a library created by Facebook developers to manipulate the DOM.
Yeah, that's true. And what does it create at the end of the day?
It's JavaScript code.
Yeah. So the technical answer is going to be a JavaScript library. You said that, right? Or framework that creates users' interfaces. Although with Next.JS, we're speaking specifically React right now. So at the end of the day, it'll make HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But we've done that already. We've made some great sites, right? Like Hungry Pets, Cloner, right? It seems like the sky's the limit for what we can create. So why bother learning React? What does it do for us? How does it make our lives easier, or why? What value does it add?
So React is much faster, and also it is component based, so you don't have to refresh the entire page. You can just refresh certain components or what you want to update. So
yeah. Way faster because we don't have to manually manipulate the DOM anymore. It will selectively know what needs to be updated.
It's more organized. Yeah.
So no more query selector or create element or anything with document. Okay? So if you find yourself using document dot, you're wrong from this point on in the course. So remember the render function? How basically we just, as our app grew, we kept on adding DOM elements that needed to be updated. And we didn't selectively do that. We just called render and everything got refreshed. But React will do that way smarter for us. And it's great because we don't need to do a render function anymore. So the mental model, I want you to think of how this all functions. Sounds great. How does this work? We designate special variables that React calls state. And when these variables change, React updates the UI for us. Okay, so there's no more document.querySelector, document.textContent, this new value. Which just, here's our special variables. If they change, automatically it updates for us, which is really cool. Once you get in the hang of this, it's like annoying going back to vanilla JavaScript because it's just so much easier and nicer to use React. You know, if you're building a website with interactions. If you're not, then it's actually annoying. So today it'll feel kind of silly, honestly, because we're not doing any interactions. So it'll feel like this is harder than just making an HTML file, and it certainly is. But, you know, the value comes when we're building applications with interactions. Any questions on all of that? Okay. So let's dive in, right? How do we create a React application? So we're going to do npx create Next.JS. Wait, I forgot the command. Is it create Next.js app? What is it, guys?
Just
Next
app.
app.
Thank you. Create next app. There we go. Okay, project name. We can call this anything. We're going to do dragons today. You'll see why in a second. TypeScript, no. ESLint, no. Tailwind, no. Source directory, yes. App router, yes. No.
Can you explain why I use the source? Because it just carries the app folder in the source folder.
Yeah, it's because there's other folders we're going to create, like components and library, and I like having them all in one place called source, but it's personal preference. Yeah. All right, so let's cd into dragons and let's explore what Next.js created us a little bit, right? So we see package.json. What does that do again? The package.json, Izzy? What is this package.json?
It tells you your dependencies.
Yeah.
And other information for your NPM.
Yeah. So it tells us that this is a node project, and this node project is dependent on some other people's code, which it went out and downloaded, called React, React DOM, and Next. That's the most important parts right now. That's all I want you to actually know. And the code that it downloaded from other people is stored in which folder, Izzy?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, so node modules is where it goes and downloads what it's dependent on. So we can actually see the folder here, React. So React is just a project that someone else wrote in JavaScript, right? That now we're using. And React is dependent on probably a million things, and that's why we see many things in our node modules. Okay, so how do we start this up, right? Our brand new React app. We run npm run dev. And if we look in our scripts, this is the command that's actually running, next dev. But that's not super important for us right now. So it's spun up our website at localhost 3000, and we can access it here. And now there's a whole lot of junk it gives us initially that I just like clearing out. So go ahead and delete all this old stuff that we don't need. Yeah, we can delete a lot. So just clearing out everything to make this kind of blank. Yeah, we can delete this. So I deleted all their stylings basically, and just want the one word hi going on. Okay, objective number 1. We have a React application, right? That's saying hi. So remember I said the whole idea with the React, the very special idea is that we have these special variables called state that when they change, the UI changes for us. So let's create a piece of state. So I'm going to create a piece of state called name. And I have to import useState from React. And in the argument, I put what I want the default for name to be. And the default, I just want it to be is Semsi, right? So now here, okay. Here's another thing we have to talk about, a really big concept. So our final applications, as we build full stack applications, it's going to be a dance between two different computers. One we call a server and one we call a client. And through Next.JS, we are going to have code. So our code can, our code will run on these two different computers. At different times at different times. But basically, so code can run on one computer, the server, or one computer, the client, which is really just the browser, right? And through the interactions of these two computers running different code is how our full stack application will actually run. This is going to be way more in depth in phase 2, but for right now, you should have a foggy idea. Almost all the code we're going to write, all the code we're going to write this week and in the past has run on the client. So it's run on the browser, right? We haven't really done anything that uses the server. Next.js, we will build a lot of server code, code that's going to run on the server. But for this week, we want to tell this module to just run on the client. So we do this with this directive of use client at the very top of our module. And when we use client, we can then use state. because state only exists on the client. So state doesn't exist on the server. So because we want to use state, this special variable that when they change, the UI changes, we have to tell Next.js and React, we're gonna do the rendering on the client. So this is called client-side rendering. So the JavaScript will run on the client's computer as opposed to the server's computer. And here, if I want to say hi Semsi, how can I do that now? So let's go back to our code. I'm showing hi, but how can I see hi Semsi? Medi, how can I inject that variable into our DOM? Are you muted or thinking? Okay, we can't hear you. Semsi, how can we say hi to you?
You could use curly braces.
Yeah.
And name.
Yeah, so what do these curly braces do? So
it allows us to inject JavaScript code.
Exactly. So right now we're using what's called JSX, this syntax that looks like HTML, but is actually JavaScript behind the scenes. And if we use the curly braces, that's a signal to the JSX that we just want to write normal JavaScript. So now we say hi Semsi, and we see hi Semsi. The cool thing is when this name variable changes, it will change automatically. So if by default this started off with Maureen, it would say hi Maureen, right? And then tomorrow we're going to change this variable, state variable, using different interactions like clicking and stuff. But we'll hold off on that today. Yeah. So any questions on state? So for today's objective, what I want to do is make a list of dragons. So here's what it's going to look like today, right? So I want to title dragons, and then I want just under it a list of some of the dragons. With the information, right? And it will show all the different dragons in our array. So this is our objective, to have dragons and then a list of dragon information. From the notes up here, I'm going to grab these dragons. So to keep these dragons, I'm going to make a new folder called lib and make a new file called dragons.js. And see, I have an array of objects of dragons. So this is going to be my state. This isn't state yet, but I'm going to make it state. So we have to imagine, today it doesn't make sense that this would be state, but try to imagine that later in this application, users are going to be able to add a dragon, edit a dragon, delete a dragon. So this is going to be dynamic information, right? So today our objective is just to list these dragons out, but maybe tomorrow it'll be to delete dragons or create new dragons. Okay? So instead of hi Maureen, I want this to say, also I recommend changing any JavaScript files where you're writing components. I recommend using .jsx because then it has syntax features in VS Code. It knows you're writing JSX basically. So you can do things like H1. So here I'm going to write dragons. It's a little finicky sometimes. Like right there, I had to hit refresh to get it to refresh. So now, instead of the name for my state, I actually want dragons and set dragons. And initially, I want my state to be this array of dragons from here. So I'm going to go ahead and export this array of dragons. And I want to import it here. And I'm noticing this should be called dragons, right? Because it's plural. So I'm going to go ahead and import. I'm going to call this default dragons from, and then I have to find the library. And now if I console.log default dragons, just to show you guys, what will I see in my console? What will default dragons look like? Maureen, what will default dragons look like?
Bring the list of dragons.
Yeah, so it'll be that array of objects, right? So whatever I put in the parentheses here will be the default value for the state that I've declared. So I want my default value. So when the user first turns on this application, they'll have certain dragons, and then later on they'll edit and delete them. But initially, I want them to have these 10 dragons. So I'm going to make it the initial argument the default dragons. Now, if I console.log dragons, what will I say? Farhan, what do you think dragons will be now?
It'll be an array that contains the object, default dragon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Somebody's got a, oh, okay. Yeah. So now I have a piece of state called dragons. That's an array of objects. But now my objective is to get a list of them showing up. So how can I get a list of dragons to show up underneath the dragons? Ritu? How can I get a list of dragons to show up underneath the dragons?
Well, first of all, you need to create a list element.
Okay.
And then
We can do that. Is that what you meant? Sorry.
no, I meant in the JSX.
Okay.
My thinking is you would probably have to map through.
Exactly. So we want to map through our state dragons. So how can we do that?
So it would be dragons dot map and then parentheses. And then you would pass dragon as a parameter. And then I think you need to put them in parentheses.
Dragon in parentheses?
I think, I can't remember the syntax.
Sure. Doesn't hurt.
And then the fat arrow. And then curly braces.
Yeah, let's pause there though. This is a great start. But but we have an error, right? Because what did we forget to do? So this is JavaScript, right? But we're in JSX. How do we tell JSX we want to write JavaScript?
We have to embed it with curly braces.
Yeah, so we have to do the curly braces. Okay. And then here, so map function takes a callback, applies that callback to each item in the array, and then returns a new array, right? So here we can console.log dragon, and we see one dragon at a time. But what do we want to return for each item?
A list item, so li a.
Sure, we could do that. Except, so I've used these curly braces. So what keyword do I have to use to return something from a function?
Oh, return.
Yeah. So I have to return, and this is going to be one whole dragon, right? So maybe initially I'll just return a whole div. And right here, I'll just say hi. So we see 10 highs, right? Why do we see 10 highs, Linjay? Why do we see 10 highs, do you think?
Because there's 10 dragons.
Exactly. So it's returning this item for each item in the array because that's what we're telling it to do. But we don't want to see high. We want to see what? So how can I get the dragon's, let's start at the name, I guess, Linjay. How can I get the dragon's name to show up?
It's the curly braces, right? And then dragon dot name.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we can do that. Very nice. But this I'll probably put in like an H2. This part doesn't matter at all, but just for fun. How do I get the emoji next, ZO2?
Hey.
Yeah, Daniel.
Sorry, Maxwell. Can I see your dragons.js file real quick?
Yep.
I'm just confused about something. So on the top of the JSX file, it says import default dragons. I thought it had to match the name of the array.
Not if you're using the default.
So yeah, I guess that part is kind of confusing me a little. If you're using the default, are you able to give it a name specifically, or?
Well, this I can call anything.
Yeah, so you can call that anything.
And I didn't want to call it dragons. Why do you think? I usually would want to call this dragons.
You don't want to get confused with the
Yeah, I don't want the collision there. So I just called it
so,
default dragon.
So it's importing everything from the file, not just the dragons, and then you're calling on the specific item that you want from the file?
No, it's just export. I mean, this file could have a million things, but we're just saying to export dragons.
Okay.
As a default, though, not as a named. So that's why we can change its name.
Okay.
Yeah, but there could be a million things in this file. We're just exporting dragons. Yeah, it's kind of rare that I change the name of things, like I said last lecture, but in this case, I didn't want these two things named the same. Okay, how do we get the emoji, ZO2?
ptag curly brace dragon dot emoji.
Yeah. And then the other things I'll do real quick. So we have species, color, fire dragon, red. Yeah, that's actually everything I wanted to cover today. We made weirdly quick time. So please, if there's questions,
Explain the state thing with the dragons, set dragons, use state.
Oh, can I explain this more?
Yeah, can you just like break it down, like what each thing is in that?
Yeah. So remember, awesomeness with React is that we have these, what I call special variables. No one else does. Just me. But these special variables where when the value changes, automatically the UI of your website changes without you doing anything. In the past, we would have had to call the render function, right? And then it would have had to find the element and manually change it. And we don't have to do that anymore, as long as we use this use state. And this is the syntax for how we use state. The name of the variable and how we change the variable. So you'll see in the future tomorrow when we change our state, but there's very specific rules about how you change state. So let me write that, right? This is more appropriate tomorrow, but very specific rules about how to change state. You can only ever use the setter function. You can't manually change state. So what would be an example of me manually trying to mutate dragons? Think of dragons as just a normal JavaScript variable, an array even. How could I manually mutate dragons?
With a for loop?
Well, the for loop that does what?
That creates elements for each of the dragon-like things, like the name, emoji of species and stuff.
So if we have an array, how do we add something to an array?
But you can spread? I'm not sure.
Remember push? Long ago?
Yeah.
So this is an example of how we mutate an array, change an array. We would add something to it, right? How do we delete something from an array?
You can use pop.
Yeah. So these are all the things that would be, if there's like a fundamental 10 commandments of React, this is what you're not allowed to do. Change state manually. So if you ever see yourself, doing like push pop on a state array, you're doing it wrong for React. Yeah.
Is there a reason why, or maybe I'm a little bit confused, like just putting too much into it. When you call the object default dragons, or when you imported it into use state, we don't need to use the spread operator in that use state?
No.
So default dragons is what data type?
It's an object?
No, I don't think so.
It's an object?
Right now.
Oh, it's an array. Okay.
Yeah, it's an array, and I want it just to be an array. And use state behind the scenes is going to make a copy of default dragons and set it as the initial state. I don't think it's going to mutate this. This really just gets the party started. But a React is going to make a copy of this, and that's the default state. But then the whole point of state is that it changes. So that's just like level 1, and then, level 2, 3, it's going to be, the dragons are going to be they're going to be adding, deleting, editing. Yeah.
Max, just a quick question. Do we need keys?
Yeah. And it should be throwing that error in the console. There it is. So each child on the list should have a unique key prop, right? So for React to do its magic, it needs, when you're using map, it needs help identifying each element specifically. So we have to give it a key variable, and this key just has to be unique for each item. And the most convenient property of each dragon that's unique is what? Which property is the most convenient that happens to be unique as well?
The ID.
Yeah. So we'll usually use ID here, but technically it could be anything unique. So technically there is one other property we could use. Well, maybe two other properties. What's the other property we possibly could use?
Index?
We could use index. That's true. But that's not as ideal to use. What property of, and that's not really a property of each dragon. That's just what the index in the array. What property? So properties are D, name, species, color. Which of these properties is unique?
Name.
Yeah, name is also probably unique. But what if eventually there's another, Fang? Who knows? I don't know the rules with dragons, so I don't know. Better to use the ID. Yeah, good question though. And that's just kind of like React homework. That's not something you have to like really be thinking of deeply. Other questions?
Does it become an issue if we call the ID within a P element and using as a key as well?
One more time.
So we put a key in the div, but if we create another P tag within the div and we use the dragon ID, does that create an issue?
P tag. Yeah. Oh, no, not at all. Dragon.id.
No.
Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
No, there's no issue at all. It would be an issue if two dragons had the same ID. Then React would complain. So this is referred to as a React functional component. For a React component, they have to return JSX, or there's something else they can return to be a React component. Does anyone know what that something else they can return is?
They can return another functional component.
Yes, or another React component. So let's see that, right? So let's make a component divider. Actually, let's make it in a different folder. So I'll show you how I like to organize these things. So I'm going to make a new folder called components. I'm going to make a new file called divider. So this, I'm just going to, a little separation for our dragons, I guess. And I'm going to make a new React component called divider. And here I'm going to just return a div with like an HR. So nothing fancy at all, right? Very simple. And then in here, I want each dragon to be separated by this other component of divider. So any ideas there? So basically I want to see a division between all these dragons. How could I do that using this new component?
Do we import the component or?
We do, yeah. But where do I place it?
You can place it within the div and then just call the component name.
Yeah, so I'm going to call divider and auto import it in. So up top here, Next.js did its thing and auto imported it for us. And now when I save this, I get this line after each dragon. So I'm showing you this today because the assignment today, I want you to do something a little bit similar. Yeah.
I noticed you also made it capitalized, the divider.jsx.
Yeah, so components should always be capitalized. Routes don't have to be, which I find annoying, but obviously Next.js developers have more say than I do. So routes, when we get into routes, they won't be capitalized, but components are. And what makes a React component, Farhan?
Is it just the capitalization, or are you talking about like the importing, exporting?
I mean, like Ivy is doing it.
So a React component is just a function except what? What does it do different than a normal function? So it's a normal function in every way, a React component, except it has to do what?
It returns JSX.
Yeah, it has to return JSX or another React component. And that's why it's a React component. So, and a React component can return multiple React components or no other components. So here it has one child component it's returning of divider, which really there's no reason to make this a separate component except as the example right here. Yeah, because this is really just equivalent to this, right? But just to show you guys. All right, any other questions? Okay, let me make sure we hit on everything we needed to hit. I think we're good though. Is this the old class? What am I looking at right now? No, this is Web 2. Oh, here it is. Okay, so you will make a clone of the following website. It should look a little familiar, right? So this is just a warm-up. I think you'll be able to make a box. Oh, we didn't talk about styling at all. But there's a global CSS file here, which you can use as you normally have. So that's all going to be the same. But maybe, maybe we'll try to make a blue box. Or no, let's style something else. So I just want a border around each div, each dragon. How can I get a border around each dragon? Opens the class.
You go to CSS.
I can go to my global CSS, correct?
Create a class for the div, or you could just do the div because it's just the divs.
I think there's multiple divs, but we can try if you want.
Yeah, and then, well, because they're all this. You want to border around each one, yeah, or you want one?
Well, no, not like this one though. The top div. I mean, we can try it. What were you thinking? So just border?
Well, yeah, border. Yeah, whatever size, solid, and then black.
Yeah, but I don't want how it looks right now. So how can we fix this?
You gotta give it a class name.
Yeah, so here instead of class, we have to use class name. Because we're in React and because this gets translated at the end of the day to be JavaScript. And in JavaScript, class is actually a reserved keyword. So now we need to use class name. And this we can call dragon container.
Mm-hmm.
And then here we can say dragon container. And there we go.
You might want to move the HR outside of the container so it's not.
Oh yeah, true. So here we can use what we call a React fragment. So another rule of components is they can only return one element. What am I doing right here? Oh, I'll just make this a div. Okay, looks pretty ugly, but it did what we wanted it to do, right? So the key has to exist on the top element you're returning in map. So I just have to move that up. Oh, and then the rule about React components, you can't return siblings. You have to return one thing. So in this case, we're returning one div that includes many children, but we're not returning like two divs on the same line. You're not allowed to do that. So you can only return one thing ever. Okay.
To make it easier, can you, instead of put div, can you put it main and then the rest of the stuff? That way it doesn't confuse.
Yeah, it's no problem. Where's the assignment?
Hey Max, how do you link your CSS file to the rest of your application?
Oh,
Is it
already
just-
done for you. Yeah.
It's done automatically?
Yeah. Because globals is imported somewhere.
In layout, I think. No.
Yeah, I think it was
Yeah.
layout.
Yeah. So as long as you don't delete that, it's fine. So here's the assignment today. You just have to do an image. You guys should be able to do that. You have to style this box. We just showed styling. And then you have to make a list of stars. So it's going to be, you probably just can copy and paste from Dragons. This is really a pretty short assignment, I think, which is fine. And then the bonus is just making cloner in React. This will involve stuff we're not learning until tomorrow. So it's really a tough bonus, but it's there if you want it. All right. All right. Let me get breakout rooms going. If there's any last minute questions, you can shout them out.
Can we rename the page.jsx? Does it have to be page?
Yep.
Yeah, it has to be called page.
Okay.
That's per Next.js.
Yeah.